Thank you for tuning in to the World Builder's Anvil, Season 2, Episode 7. Today's episode topic, Bottoms Up.
Don't know where to start building your fantasy world?
Do you need more? Does it make sense?
Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination.
This is the place where we will prime your mind.
Now, it's time to heat up the forge.
Break out the mithril ingots and hammer.
Welcome to the World Builder's Anvil. I'm Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And I'm Michael Miller.
Let's sup from the muck of Java and build.
Welcome back. As always, I am Michael Miller. Jeff is not with us today due to technical difficulties and scheduling difficulties. We had a mishap over the weekend, couldn't get Jeff and I could not get together to record, so I'm just doing a solo episode, which is fine because I'm doing something that Jeff doesn't know anything about anyway. We're talking about bottoms-up world building today. Now, Jeff's preferred method is the top-down method. My preferred method is the bottom-up. They're not exactly opposites so much as they are a different approach. They're a little opposite, but some of what I'm going to talk about is really just stealing some of the show notes from the top-down episode. We'll get into that in a few minutes. But the big thing about my approach to the bottoms-up method is really it's more about starting with minutia, and not so much as intricate detail, so much as a singular concept. So I want something that grabs me, you know. I want something that inspires me, something that conceptually really interests me, okay? And that's where I'm going to start. So we've talked about a couple stories I've done before. A couple that I use examples of. Usually I go to the whole speed thing where a day occurs, a specific day in humanity where everyone born from that day forward can run at 60 miles an hour. Like, for some reason, the human race has evolved, and everybody from that date forward can run, once they're an adult, at 60 miles an hour. Which is to say, you know, as they progress and they age, they can run faster and faster and faster, the same way normal human beings grow and progress. So that's it. That's the concept that I find really interesting. Like, how would that change our society? How would that affect a family where one person is born after that date and another person was born before it? So that one little concept is, the rock that you drop in the water that thus starts creating the ripples. From there is where you start extrapolating a world built around it. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be a concept like that. You could have a character that inspires you. Like, maybe you want to make, a Batman-style character or a hero-style character or a villain or, just something. You've got a character in mind, and now you want to tell stories about that character within a world. So you start with the character. For me, there's no limit here. You could start with a character. You could start with a story idea. So you could start with a world idea and wrap the world around it. That's how I start. So the first thing is, like, what is it that's interesting to me? What is the thing that I'm passionate about? So going back to the 60 mile an hour idea, we'll start there. So now I have the idea, but it's interesting to me. And Jeff and I don't tend to poo-poo the concept of world building for world building's sake. If you guys want to world build just for the world building's sake, then world build till your heart's content. That's fine. But I imagine most of the people that listen to this show are world building to a purpose, whether that's for a role-playing game or novelization, a comic book, a video game, whatever you want to do. If that's the case, then this next question is really important to the bottom-up method approach. So you ask yourself, why is it interesting to me? But beyond that, how can I make it interesting, or in my case, I like to add inspiring, to others? So, okay, everybody gets to be able to run 60 miles an hour. Well, that's kind of neat, but why is it interesting? Well, for me, I always get caught up in contradictions, whether it's a character or a storyline, an ability or a lack of. So in this scenario, what would be crucial for me to tell the story is to have one character be born before the date and have another character born just after it. So these characters are grown and raised together, as children, probably siblings. Like I find that interesting. So it could be two close friends, but they could be siblings. I would think that if they were friends, I don't know that they'd be friends. Maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't. Maybe there'd become a societal segregation. I'm kind of extrapolating while we're going through the concept. But for me, I would want the very, very intimate what is the difference, and I would probably make those two characters siblings. That way they are forced to grow up together in their own little microcosm. They're constantly, as they grow up, they have to deal with the fact that one character can run 60 miles an hour and the other character can't. As they grow up as children, there's an unlevel playing field when it comes to playing games together or playing sports together. Maybe there are different sports teams. But you see how this one concept, it's very easy for me to quickly start talking about how even just with these two characters, there's societal differences. It's like, okay, well, they go to school together. How do they make it fair at school? Well, you've got kids anyone born before a certain date plays in this league of baseball. Anybody born after this date plays in this league in baseball. No matter how good you are at baseball, if you were born before that date, you just can't compete with the speed of the players, who were born after it. So you'd have different leagues, different, everything would be cut up just to try to make it fair for the haves and the have-nots regarding the speed. So you start with that concept. You find a concept that really talks to you, right? So in this one, I love this concept. Then you ask yourself, what's interesting about it? Like, why is that interesting? Why do a little reflection on it. Like, why is that an interesting concept to me? And then how can I make that concept interesting to others and or inspiring to others? And that really dovetails well into my next one, which is, what is it that I want to say? And Jeff and I have talked about this many times when it comes to storytelling. We're not just talking about a world building concept here. We're talking about a storytelling concept. And I think that's one of the things that lends itself to the bottom-up method, is that the bottom-up method is not necessarily trying to build an entire world. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But with the bottoms-up method, you get to story very quickly. You work around such a small idea that story just starts developing around that concept very quickly. And then you're writing a story and building the world at the same time, which I find that interesting to have it all start to come together at the same time. So what is it you're trying to say? Because we're talking about storytelling wrapped up in world building, it's important to have a message. Why are you going to tell a story between these two characters? So let's call them siblings. You got, sibling A, runs really fast. Sibling B does not. So why is that interesting? And better yet, what's the point that I'm trying to make by telling the story, by showing the difference, by highlighting what I find interesting in the difference? Well, maybe my point is, I want people to come out of the story feeling that regardless of differences, we all should love each other. So like my goal is a compassionate point that I'm trying to build into the story. So again, because I find contradiction interesting, this is how I think about it. I would be building things for these two characters to constantly overcome tensions, things that put them at odds with each other, but always there's a way for them to find their way back. And then, of course, if you're doing 3-act structure, there's going to be points where it looks like that's it. They're never going to be, they're never going to be a a comfortable relationship again. Like maybe they're like, I don't hang out with my brother, or I don't hang out with my sister anymore because we had this falling out over our differences, and then you circle back around at some point and resolve. But that's what I find interesting. And without having what you want to say, then you could pretty much go out in any direction. So having something to say, having a point to your tale helps guide the focus of the world building, since you're world building at the same time. So at this point, I'm gonna go back through those 5 points again, and then I'm gonna jump into notes that are from Jeff's episode on top-down world building. So number 1. Identify the inspiring concept. Write down what concept is what really inspires you for the idea of this next world/story that you want to work on. Second, write down, why is it interesting to you? Like you might say, oh, well, this kind of intrigues me, the thought of a magic system where, I talked about this in another episode, where there's a magic system where people have to trade their memories for the ability to cast a big spell. So I find that interesting because now you're giving up a part of yourself for power. And again, there's an inspiring concept. Why is that interesting to me? Well, the idea that you could use that as a benefit, and it's also a drawback. Some people say, oh, well, you're going to give up, these powerful memories for powerful spells. So what if you're giving up, like, the moment of your firstborn? Like, you never get to have that memory again. But you could also go through trauma. And if you had some really bad traumatic experience, you could get rid of that memory too. So there's all kinds of neat things that you could do with this. So why is it interesting to me? Well, because of the dynamic of letting go of a piece of yourself for the gain of power. Next question. So identify, and then why is it interesting? And then number 3 is, how can I make this interesting or inspiring to other people? And then number 4 is, what is it that I want to say? And this starts pushing you into story, I realize, from world building. But the important part about that is that will help tell you what you need to world build to make this project work. And then we get into number 5, which gets us into Jeff's stuff, which is find the nouns that answer my questions. So the questions we're going to go over are actually the same as the ones that Jeff did in the top-down world building method. So those 6 questions are, where are we? So you're going to write down the places that you need for your story. How does it relate to us? When are we? So timeline. Who is there? And this could be like races or specific characters. What is there? This is would be like props or set pieces. And then what are they doing? And that's talking about like cultures and their actions. So you can go back to the other episode and listen to that because I don't want to rehash it all here. And then basically the nouns that you're going to need are all your main things, right? You're going to need places, you're going to need times, timelines, you're going to need fictional races, if there's going to be different races, elves and dwarves and what have you. The set pieces and props, like if you're going to have like an Excalibur or a Batmobile or like some sort of special things that are going to be highlighted in this story, you got to make that stuff up. Your different cultures and the different rules on how the world works. The thing that I really like about the bottoms-up method is that it cuts through a lot of chaff. So with a top-down method, if you're going to look down at an entire planet, build the whole world out, you start to think about a rock in space, right? Where are the continents? Where is the water? Where does the sun hit the land? Okay, that determines how everything develops. Like if this side of the planet's really warm, then that's where a lot of life is going to grow. But if this side's really cold, you're not going to get a lot of life there. And a lot of it starts to fill in its own gaps, but you're still going to have to be the one to trudge through, then make all that stuff up as you go along. Whereas the bottoms-up method, you start with a small idea, and that small idea tends to snowball down the hill, and generate a lot of information and questions for you and things to think about and create. And everything that you're creating is directly tied to the thing that inspired you in the first place. It's directly tied to the concept that got you charged up to start writing it in the beginning. So you're not creating a lot of stuff that you're not going to use. Or you know, it's certainly possible that you could get stuck in a tangent and start just extrapolating, like going back to what I was saying about the baseball team, right? So you got these two kids growing up together. They both want to go out for the baseball team. One kid's playing on the fast team. The other kid's playing on the slow team. And you could world build right there. You could start the idea of different sports leagues, different professional sports leagues, how colleges start drafting players out of high school, how the professional leagues start drafting players out of college. What do people do to cheat? And you could go off and make all this stuff up about all these sports leagues. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to use all that stuff for the story you're going to tell. These characters might not be big on sports. They might have played as children, but then as they grow up socially, we do different things with the story that's more interesting than the differences that show up for them on a sports, little league team. So you can fall into the same pitfalls, but I still find that it's a lot easier to avoid them with this method than trying to build an entire planet just to tell a story. So for me, I love the bottom-up method. I love to get caught up in a singular concept that gets me passionate about a fictional idea. Something where I'm like, oh, wow, that's really cool, and what can I do with that? Immediately it's always, what can I do with that? Like, how can I make that interesting for other people? And how can I make a story out of it? What story do I want to tell with it? So give this method a try. The real simple world builder's task for you is to write a one-page story using the bottom-up method. I don't care if you want to use create a character, create a concept. Just pick something you have not done before and start with just the kernel of that one idea. From that kernel, I want you to extrapolate out and write a short story. For the real-world task, I would say go back. Actually, that's more of a world builder task, huh? I was going to say go listen to Jeff's top-down episode, which, you could totally do that. But I'm going to say before it's starting to get cold here in New England, I would say before it starts getting too cold, go out and enjoy some of the outdoors. It's getting real chilly here. I think it was in the 30s this morning. So I'm going to say go outside, get some fresh air, and we'll catch you guys on the next episode. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much for listening to the World Builders Anvil.
We would love it if you would share the World Builders Anvil with 2 of your friends.
And so would they.
If they are unfamiliar with podcasts, then you get to introduce them to the wonderful world of podcasting.
Take them to Stitcher or iTunes, or best of all, just send them to our website, www.gardul.com.
That's GARDUL.com.
Now strike while the mithril's hot.